more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Well, hey, Julia, how are you today?
Hello. I am here and ready to go.
Well, I hope you've been hydrating all day today, because today we're hitting the British strong ale. So by the end of this Stylecast, I'm willing to bet one of us may be on the floor. But we'll see. We'll see. You never know. These are strong ales from Britain, and these have this category. When we talk about them, we're referencing the 2021 BJCP guidelines, and this one is kind of sort of a catch-all for anything stronger than normal strength beers that isn't that isn't a roasty beer like a stouter or imperial stout or anything like that. So this is a little bit of a catch-all, but in this Stylecast, we're going to talk about the British strong ale. But Julia, if you were about to ask me, but a strong ale isn't necessarily a category. It's more of just a strength of a unspecified beer style. That's what you're thinking, right?
Well, I know the answer, so no.
Yeah.
But please do explain on those that might want that answer.
Well, for anyone out there listening or watching who's thinking, wait a minute, British strong ale, that's not a category, that's a strength. Well, you're absolutely right. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this. This is really this particular category or subcategory just really doesn't fit into a great category. So we're just calling it a British strong ale. It could be a strong mild. It could be a strong bitter. It could be anything that's not a porter or stout. So we're gonna dive in just a minute. One more thing about this is we're going to talk about this in more detail, but this is that style that fits in between normal strength beers and barley wine. So this is just strong. This is imperial. This is like a double. All those terms are interchangeable. But let's, before we go any further with this, I'm going to open up a beer. And how about, would you talk about the ingredients that we can see in a beer like this?
And I do like the setup because it's very helpful on talking about strong bitter ale from 2021 Beer Judge Certification Program guidelines, because that catch-all notion is even kind of referenced in the style guidelines itself, in the sense that there's a large spectrum of examples within this actual style, within the category of strong British ale. And I like that you pointed out non-roasty. So the ingredients that I'll talk about don't get us to that roast, but think of a stronger mild, as Jeremy said. Think of a stronger brown ale. Think of a stronger English bitter. That's where we're going with this in the style guidelines. And they're super fun, right? A little more flavor, a little more girth, a little more alcohol. Who doesn't love all of that I just said, right? So characteristic ingredients will vary, but pale English malt is your base fermentable, and you're going to have often added, as the English and the UK oriented brewers love to teach us, sneaking in that caramel malt, right? Sneaking in some specialty malts, but not true roast essence. You will have darker examples that are certainly there with some chocolate and black malt, but it's not going to take us to roast. And then you absolutely have those sugary adjuncts that are very common in a lot of English ales, particularly the bitters and old ales, for example, like the maize, which is corn, flaked barley, wheat, to give it some body, excuse me, to give it some body, to give it some girth. And these are very, very common additions to this style category. And then finishing hops are traditionally English, as the style guidelines point out. So you've got those UK earthy hops that are different than German noble hops, definitely different than American, New Zealand style hops and the like. And that's, the gist of the ingredients. What are we looking at, Jeremy? How does it look in the glass?
So this example is actually pretty spot on to the style. I mean, for these beers, we are looking at an amber to a dark reddish, almost brown color. This one in my glass right now, it depends. If you're seeing this, it may look a little bit dark just because of the way that the light is on me. But I'm looking at it, and it is a profoundly amber beer, not quite copper, but it's has a strong lean in that direction. The other thing too about this is these beers are typically clear, from my experience, but they can be opaque. It's you have a huge range between clear and opaque. So it the bullseye is 4 feet wide on there if you're throwing darts at it. The other thing too about this, you can have this kind of low to medium, or not low to medium, but kind of a light to mediumly creamy tan head. This one is a little bit kind of a off white tan to me. The thing I find particularly interesting about the appearance in these beers too is, while this sample in my glass is actually holding onto that head retention pretty well, you may not always get a good head retention in these beers. Keep in mind that these are strong British ales. That means they can be slightly strong to quite a bit strong. And foam and alcohol do not always play well together. So if you have a stronger beer, stronger alcohol, you may not have a head retention, and there's kind of a inverse correlation there between those two. But that's what I have for appearance. How about aroma?
Aroma is a great one to talk about, especially because we're going to lead with the ale aspect of this style. British strong ale means it has ale yeast. So you're really going to notice fruity esters, right? These are fermentation byproducts from the English ale yeast that lends itself to dried fruit, and can, elicit everything from cranberries to overripe strawberries to just those fruity kind of dark fruit esters. And then you might get an essence of the malt as well. Caramel, I mentioned the caramel malts, you're going to potentially get an essence of caramel. How about some nuts? How about some cashews? How about some toffee? Really nice illicit of aroma to lead into the flavor here. And you're going to maybe get a little bit of ethanol, but it's not supposed to be harsh or too solventy. Hop aroma, it says, can vary widely based on approach from the brewer for this style. I don't expect to get a lot of hop aromas in these beers, but I will say these beers should be drinking more fresh than, say, its companion style, the old ale, which Jeremy and I at Sense of Beer Style will also have a Stylecast. So you want to find some hops in there in a fresh example, and it's going to give you those English essence of hops. As I noted, kind of earthy. They talk about resin, fruity, floral notes. So you're looking for that, but it's not a must. And you want the beer to be balanced. It's not going to be predominantly, in my view and experience, with the hops, though. You're often going to get more so an essence in the aroma of the malty complexity and the fruity esters, maybe some hops, and there you go.
Yeah.
And then that all leads into
The flavor, of course. And this is where this is a very balanced but malt forward beer, which I love a good complex malt. This beer in my hand, it again is kind of hitting the specs for this style. It reminds me of almost like a cinnamon toast, a fairly well toasted cinnamon toast with just a drizzle of caramel, and it almost gives me an impression of we've all had cotton candy, but if you've ever had fresh cotton candy right out of the machine where it's still warm, you can still smell that not burnt, but the cooked sugar smell. And I'm getting a little bit of that. Other flavors that we can get in this, it's a very like a medium to high malt flavor here, but that can manifest in bread crust. The cinnamon toast, like I just mentioned, it can be nutty, but to me, I get a lot of toasted cashews is a common flavor I get out of it, and that's a very, very specific aroma and flavor. But we're talking caramel, toffee. Can go a little bit chocolate if we have some of those darker grains thrown in there just for fun. But chocolate is not a major component in this beer. You talked about the esters. We're talking some of those dark dried fruits. I get a little bit of fig and date, especially date, out of this one. That's a flavor memory I have. So I get date foremost in a lot of beers of this nature. The the hops coming through this are going to be those earthy, hops from Britain that are a little bit more reminiscent of like green tea, wet soil, riverstone, drywall type of flavors, and I mean that in the best way possible. That alcohol pop that you're smelling, Julia, you can also taste it if it's there. It doesn't have to be there, but it can be a low to a medium low alcohol if it's there at all. But for me, it's usually a mid palate alcohol, or excuse me, a peppermint pop that just kind of rears its head and then goes away. When it's done well, it should never be fusel, should never be harsh. It should never burn your tongue and singe your nose hairs. That's a bad kind of alcohol. Um, but these beers also, because of that British yeast, it's okay to have none at all or just a little bit of diacetyl. In fact, if I owned the brewery, I would encourage a little bit of diacetyl because all the flavor profiles in this beer, any off flavors that you may not want, they have places to hide in a beer like this. You mentioned these are better when they're fresh. I absolutely agree, but they do age a little bit nicer. They do balance out. They do kind of mature out, and so there are places for some of these flaws to hide, and they become almost endearing in this particular style, from my experience. But that's what my take on flavor. Let's talk about mouthfeel.
Yes, please. And also, too, with the aging, you will notice that when beers age, malt will become more forward and developed and advanced,
Yeah,
and hops, both flavor and bitterness, will go more to the background. So
yeah.
that's an indication too, if you're having an example that's not fresh, of maybe why it's showcasing more malt forward and less hop forward. And definitely on mouthfeel, medium to full. When we talk about the vital statistics for the British strong ale style, you'll see based on the final gravity how high the residual sugar is allowed to be, above 10, 15 and the like. So medium to full, almost a chewy body is what the style guidelines talk about. And then, low to moderate carbonation. Jeremy kind of referenced that, but you're not going to have, especially as it gets higher in alcohol, the chance for success of a large, high carbonated beer. It's just a struggle. Also, that will affect the collar of foam. And so you're going to have a smoother texture with less prickle from that carbonation that's low to moderate. And then Jeremy already covered the ethanol aspect, a little bit warming, but never overwhelming or solvent like.
Yeah. So let's talk about the styles that we could compare them to. I think the most obvious comparison would be, well, let me start with, we could compare this to some of the bitters, but this would be stronger than those bitters, especially what we fondly refer to as the ESB, or the extra special bitter. This one is just a stronger version of that. Typically, it doesn't have to be a lot, but there's a little bit of overlap there. This beer, really much pound for pound, its brother or sister beer would be the old ale that we'll talk about in a different style cast. There's a lot of overlap there within strength, and a lot of overlap in ingredients, overlap in the style of beer, the underlying style of beer there. But there isn't that inherent aged character that you get out of an old ale. This can be aged, it can sit, but it's not going to get that good funky flavors and aromas that you would expect from an old ale. That we could also compare this to a British barley wine, but just much smaller. This is somewhere in between that strong bitter and that barley wine is where this beer really sits, but it can ultimately be the same beer. So that's a great way to think about the comparing the style to others. Let's talk about the commercial examples.
And the fun part is you need to go out and buy several, whether you're drinking
Yeah.
one while you listen to our show, I always say, or you listen and then go out and get one and listen again. You've wet your whistle, hopefully, with everything we're describing. And so the commercial examples are really going to take you to a place of just true malt laden, fermented beer reward, right? Fuller's 1845, certainly more well known in the US because of their prowess in exporting into the US. And, Samuel Smith Winter's Welcome is definitely one that I've had over my career and covet. And McEwen's Champion, which I've never had. McEwen's has prowess in other styles, but I've never come across the Champion. J.W. Lee's has a strata of beers that they're very well known for. The Harvest Ale, when we talk about English barley wine, absolutely. And I've got one in my fridge for that Stylecast. But J.W. Lee's Moonraker is one to covet and get. And you can lay one down and also drink it fresh the night you bring it home from whatever package or liquor store that you got it at. So there's a multitude of styles that are the example. And if you were to do what we call in the beer world of a vertical, not a horizontal, Jeremy, but a vertical, you're going to get a sense of that spectrum that we talk about in the different examples, how some are sweeter, some are darker, some are not as high in ABV. And that leads us to the beer stats to really showcase to you the difference and the expansion of this style all within one grouping.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the numbers. When we start with this beer, let's start with a gravity. So this is a beer that can be 5.5 ABV, which is in the upper end of the normal range for alcohol, but it can go all the way up to 8. And if anyone's paying attention or coming back to this or looking ahead, when we start talking about barley wine, the British barley wine starts at 8, and this stops at 8 by the BJCP standard. So there's a very clear delineation between what we're talking about between strong and barley wine. When we get into the IBUs, you should have some really good hop presence there from the low 30 where we can taste it and it's balanced to the 60 where it has a more of a center roll on stage on your palate. And that takes us to let's talk about the gravities then. When we first brew this and we take that initial gravity, we're looking at 1055 to 1080. And there's that correlation there between original gravity and ABV. So 1055, 1080, 5.5 to 8.0. So that lines up really well for us. For those of us who live in Plato land, that's going to turn out to just under 14 Plato all the way up to 20. After this is done fermenting and is done attenuating, the final gravities can be, remember, we talked about this in many different style casts. Above 1010, we've got some body to it. These typically finish out around 1015 all the way up to 1022. And when we get into Plato, we're talking 3.7 to 5.5. But that just shows that there is quite a bit of residual sugar, quite a bit of body left over. And it just makes everything just more interesting. And that is another telltale sign of this style. If you're looking at the numbers and trying to ascertain whether it's a strong ale or something else, those numbers will help clue you in that this is a bigger beer. The SRM, the color. If you're in the US, we use a SRM. This one's going to be 8 to 22. My beer is right just shy of copper, so I'm going to put that right around 14. So this is just right in that range. It's a pretty big range, though. After 8 to 22, we're going from light amber to light brown. So it's full within that amber spectrum. If you're in EBC land or European Brewery Convention, we're at 16 to 44. And when we finish this out, we talked about ABV before for this beer. Again, if you're a Plato person, that's going to put this at right around 10 to 14.5 Plato as far as the alcohol is concerned. But when you study this, look at these numbers and how they compare to the barley wine. See how they stack up to the old ale. See how they stack up to the strong bitter, and you'll notice these patterns are there, and you'll be able to take a look at these numbers and start to figure out the clues that direct you down the path to tell which beer this is. But those are the stats. Let's talk about the glassware.
Yes, and glassware will certainly vary, just like examples of these beers within the style itself. The JW Moonraker, I mentioned that. That's a 6.5% example. Been made since 1950. They showcase, and I have never personally had, and I covet to get one, a grip glass. And it's almost a stacked glass that has ridges, and kind of is a tulip style glass. And so that's one to consider. But at 6.5%, I could drink this in a dimpled pub mug. I could drink this in a Willy Becker even. and an English Nonic pint. It's not going to barrel me over so much at that level. When you get into the 8% give or take range, you're going to want to have your glassware probably consideration help you drink a little bit less each time. And Jeremy's drinking it out of one of our favorite glasses that we see a lot actually in the US and craft brewers. Are you enjoying that glass to showcase this beer?
Yeah, because it does the job of moving the liquid to lips, which is the number one goal of any glass, but it does it with style, and it does it by propping up that foam that we talked about. The foam earlier. The foam may just go away, but if you have a good glass, that'll keep it there as long as possible and just keep that experience there a little bit better. So yeah, I love this glass.
Sure. And then beer temperature too will
Mhm.
play into it. You know, my favorite trick, if you listen to our show, Sense of Beer Style, it's get one out of the fridge, drink it, have a second one, because, hey, you can. And we are alive and well beyond just hopefully surviving and drinking for thirst and eating for calories. We're here for the gastronomic enjoyment of our drink and food. And so I want you to have two in an evening. And the first one's colder. And then by the time it warms up in your gullet and in your palate, you're done and your glass is empty. And the second one you pulled out at that same time, and you're going to drink that a little bit warmer. I would want this in the cellar temperature range eventually. So, all the way up to 50 Fahrenheit or I believe 10 Celsius and the like. And so I think drink it cold, but see what happens when it's warmer. And you're going to start to see why beer is such a beverage that can also be showcased, not at frigid 38-degree Fahrenheit mass-produced lager temperatures.
Yeah, this for sure. This is a beer that I'm going to pour and then hold in my hand for that very, very reason, just to warm it up and just see how the story changes as we go through the temperature range. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and then take us to pairings.
Yeah, pairings. This for me, when I think about the food I want to eat with a good British bitter or a mild or even a British brown, it's very much the same with this, but these beers, because they can be a bit stronger, are going to have a little bit more impact. So, we can make sure that's number one rule in my book, which I don't have a book. You have a book. I don't have a book yet, but the number one rule in any book is start with um, aligning the intensities and making sure that the impact matches. And so we can use some bigger food here, like some good meat pies. I'm thinking some osso buco. This would be great with some spicy dishes too, just because it is a little bit more malt forward. But just a little caution: if you have one of these that has a little bit higher alcohol, that alcohol and that spiciness may not interact well. So just be mindful when you go forward with your pairings. What about you?
I always love to say that sweet calms heat. So
Mhm.
higher residual sugar beers at 1015 to 1022 final gravity. This is going to have that residual sugar to calm capsaicin heat. However, as Jeremy is expressing, ethanol is almost like a solvent on your tongue, and it opens up the pores on your tongue and makes you more susceptible to the bite of that ethanol. So it's a catch-22. You want it lower ABV with higher residual sugar to then calm that heat. Sweet calms heat for your spicier dishes. I love what you just shared, and I'm just going to go big picture. Let's just start romanticizing about what we mentioned in the flavor and aroma profile. Think caramel, think nougat, think cashews,
Mhm.
right? Think all the way sometimes to light milk chocolate, not dark cacao chocolate. And then any number of things that would come to mind. I'm thinking cashew carrot cake, right? I'm thinking caramel
Oh, that would be
popcorn.
good.
I mean, I'm thinking things that are those synergies. And when it comes to the pairing, Jeremy said one of the cardinal rules that you can also break, but it's fun to follow because it's effective, is match intensities. So you want a medium intensity food dish in its richness, its umami, its fat, and its heaviness or that lack thereof. And then you also want something that's going to be maybe synergistic and harmonious. So find a food that has some of those flavor and aroma profiles that we mentioned, and you're going to have a home run.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful. Great advice from the queen of pairing.
Well, right back at you, king of British Strong Ale. Thank you for taking us through it.
Yeah.
And we'll say thank you for listening to us and Jeremy and Julia with a sense of beer style.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.